Yo, welcome back to Spangled Gamblers. I'm your host, Keen Dog, and this is your OG podcast about betting and winning real money on politics. Boys, we have a very special episode today. I say that every week. I actually mean it this week. Today, we have with us John Phillips in the lab. John is the CEO of PredictIt. Okay, he's like the grand poobah. He's the guy who kind of invented this game that we're now playing in. And we're going to talk to him about this big race that's going on in Virginia. We've got a little mailbag of questions, a little Q&A. We're going to hear about his vision, where it began, where it's going. This is just a really exciting time in the business of political prediction. And it coincides with a very exciting election in our own politics here in the United States. So, John, welcome to Star Spangled Gamblers.
Hey, thank you. It's good to be on.
It's great to have you. So I got to ask you the question, when people are kids, they want to be firefighters, they want to be airline pilots, they might even want to be the president of the United States. When did you decide that you wanted to be like the political gambling guy?
Oh, it's like when I couldn't be an astronaut. It still is, by the way. And I think with the help of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, maybe I'll get a chance to go into space. But no, I'm serious. That's what I wanted to be, was an astronaut.
Didn't you get kind of close, though?
About as high as I can jump off the ground, maybe, 2 feet off the ground when I'm on a good day. No, I never got that. I didn't get that close. Because there were many more people qualified. Maybe if I tried for firefighter, I don't think I'd make that either.
I thought I read somewhere that you bravely deduced how to build an atomic power plant or something like that when you were in middle school or something, some sort of rocket science thing.
There is a shred of truth to that rumor. I was a college student at Princeton, and I was a physics major. And I took it on as my junior thesis to design an atomic bomb.
So you're a physics major who now is working in the poli-sci field. Isn't that sort of the opposite of how it's supposed to go?
Well, I was a physics major. I actually didn't graduate in physics. In fact, I was on academic probation before the A-bomb design. I graduated in aerospace engineering.
Okay.
And no, this PredictIt had not even been conjured up. Even as a joke back in those days. And that was a long time ago. No, PredictIt was really the byproduct of other people before us who had in trade, and others who had seen or had the vision to want to create these markets as a way of forecasting. Some of them were pure gambling sites, and some of them were more research oriented. And that's how it came to be.
I mean, it's not the easiest thing to do, right? You could be doing anything with your life. You have other businesses that are quite successful, but you choose to kind of row upstream against many, many different winds to create this product, right? You must enjoy it. Do you trade on it?
I can't trade. Yes, sorry. I wish I could. So I gave you the plus and the minus. PredictIt is the most interesting venture I've been involved in my life. It's just so unexpectedly cool how markets can forecast the future, not with 20/20 vision, or 100% accuracy, but PredictIt is, it demonstrates how efficient markets are at assimilating and then distilling millions of pieces of information from many different sources, and distilling that information into odds, which is also known as prices. And so you get a market on, why shouldn't you be able to trade political futures alongside other types of tangible assets, corn, pork bellies and corn. And when you do allow trading, and you do have these traders come in, you end up getting remarkably accurate forecasts.
Why do you think people are so scared of political gambling? People get excited when you tell them it exists. And then after that, they kind of act weirded out. That's my experience. What is it about Americans that are so, prudish and freaked out by this information that we're unlocking and showing to the world?
The crowds I go in, they think it's the cool. Tell me if this doesn't happen to you.
Okay.
They ask me what I do. I say, oh yeah, I run PredictIt. It's a prediction market on politics. And they go, what? What is that? And then, it's interesting. Our market research shows that when people first hear of PredictIt, to your point, the first reaction is this legal? Am I going to get in trouble if I do this? And once they've overcome that objection, then the next question is, are these guys going to cheat me? Is this some offshore gambling site that I'm not going to get my money back? So those are the immediate reactions. I'm amazed at, to me, I live this and eat it, and this is what I breathe. But I think a lot of people don't know about PredictIt yet. But when they find out about it, they ask, how can I sign up for this?
So that's what we're here for. Like, I worked in DC for a while. I don't know if you've ever listened to Spangled Gamblers or if you know a thing about us, but I'll mansplain a little bit here.
Please.
Worked in Hollywood for a while after that. And something like this, I feel like building a culture is very important to building the product. So I do laugh in my head, and I want to know, like, that this trader subculture exists out there on the internet. Has it made it into your office? Like, do people ever use words like beta cuck, tweet killer, gray box of doom, like all this? This is all the lingo that exists around your. Have you ever heard your colleagues say this stuff?
Yeah, yeah, of course, yeah. No, I mean, look, the comments and the back channel stuff. One of the most interesting cultural aspects of this. I spend a lot of my time around traders just because I don't know why, but I do get a lot of comments from and the comments themselves are actually rather insightful if you think about it, as well as inciting. But that's another story.
Right. It's like some sort of beta male rage culture, but it's also it's outsiders from Washington who seem to have a better beat on things than maybe the people in. So let's ask you, Pratik's on this call too. Pratik, you don't have to let me do all the talking. I know I'm a ball hog, but there's a big, we're recording this end of week. There's a big election coming up on Tuesday in Virginia. You've got a lot of markets posted on this, counties, cities, margins. You are offering a diversity of markets that's well in excess of, this is now a more competitive space than it was even a year or two ago, but your competitors don't offer markets at this level of granularity. Is this like an emerging philosophy of PredictIt's about the types of traders and the types of data that you want to synthesize with your product?
Well, I mean, the way PredictIt has evolved has in large part been a result of our customers pushing us around and haranguing us in terms of what they want to see and what they and believe me, as you guys know, when we air, we hear about it. And so the traders themselves have been the ones who come up with most of the market suggestions. Yes. Okay. So somebody says, hey, let's do an election. Let's do the German election. Okay. That's kind of obvious that we would put a market up on that. But then to have it broken down by which states in Germany are going to vote which way. That's, you think about that, or even in Virginia, as you mentioned, you've got these county by county vote totals, and this gets down. There is a whole culture of people out there who spend their time focused on how are those absentee ballots, where are they coming in from, and how are they breaking compared to 2 and 4 years ago. So yeah, specializing in politics makes sense, but that's a big area. The Federal Reserve, I'm surprised by how many people are trading on the Fed chair, reconciliation, and infrastructure. We should talk about that. But this is something where, yes, people are doing it. And it's not just the traders, right? It's also people who follow the odds because they have much bigger investments outside of PredictIt that are hinging on what's going to happen with reconciliation, for instance, or some of the specifics in the bill, which you can also forecast on.
Right. There's a sort of honesty in markets that. I don't know. I guess we've all learned to be kind of skeptical of what media and even polling has had to say. Pratik, I see you sort of leaning in and leering. This is usually when I hear from you.
I see him leaning in. I don't see him leering, but that's right.
No, well, look, John, I mean, I think, as you know, one of the reasons people who are using PredictIt are so loyal is that I think one of your real comparative advantages is the diversity and selection of political markets in particular. And I think this Virginia case is a good example. We did get a question about this from one of our users, Bob Barker, and he wrote in here, in as much detail as possible, how do PredictIt and the CFTC communicate about what markets PredictIt is and is not allowed to run? How often, and can he bring back tweet market? So there's that question, but I wonder if you could talk generally. I think I know that you obviously would like to have as many markets as you can. I think we also know that you're operating under certain realities. So what is sort of the process and the limitations around market creation and PredictIt?
So that's a great question, but it would be a long answer because it's been a long time coming, right? So how we operated when we first set how Victoria University, which was the entity that received the no action letter from the CFTC, they had been running a prediction market for 7 or 8 years prior to 2014, when with Victoria we went to the CFTC to seek permission to be able to operate this market. So, and they've been running a good prediction market. It was multinational in scope. They had thousands of traders, not hundreds of thousands, but certainly more than, for instance, Iowa Electronic Markets had. But they were bedeviled by the regulatory requirements in New Zealand. Okay, this is like the KYC, the know your customer, the anti-money laundering. Those things are difficult and expensive to comply with. It doesn't sometimes seem that way from the outside, but you have to do certain things. And so when we went with Victoria to the CFTC, we knew that there were certain things that were probably in the realm of the possible and others that were not. There was a precedent with Iowa where no action relief had been granted. And since that time, the scope of the questions and how the questions are generated. Initially, we thought up the questions, but they weren't that hard to think up. Who's going to be elected president? But since that time, the more interesting markets, I think, generally speaking, are suggested by traders. And then we've got what's called a markets committee, which consists of 3 people who try to determine before the market goes up, is this going to make a good market? And so sometimes there's back and forth with the traders who are suggesting the market, but generally speaking, the questions committee, then they make a decision based on a number of things, but will the market be liquid? Is there going to be enough interest, right? Are people going to be interested enough to want to invest in this market? That's almost like a starting requirement. If it's not going to be a market that's interesting, and we put up markets that don't draw a lot of interest, and sometimes they're worth putting up, but often they're not, because if people aren't going to be participating in the market, what's the point? The other criteria that we look at is what's called a resolution authority. And it's something I think we've spoken with you about. The resolution authority needs to be unambiguous, and it generally has to be some sort of a government source. It doesn't do us any good to put up a market where people are still arguing about what actually happened. And there are instances where you think the resolution authority, it's got to be a binary outcome, either yes or no. If it's somewhere in the middle and you don't know whether it really happened or didn't happen, or it's a matter of definition, that's not a good thing, because people on both sides will line up and say, my yes won, my no vote. So I don't want to take up, anyway, I told you it was a long answer. So that's some of the thinking that goes into the questions generation process. And there is communication within the team. There's communication, obviously, with Victoria and us. And then there's communication with CFTC.
Go ahead, Pratik.
Well, to the degree, and again, I understand you're obviously limited, but to the degree you can talk about it, can you give us some sense of what are the contours or the guidance or the frameworks that regulators have given you? There are the obvious ones, no death markets, assassinations, whatever. But for example, how do you think of something like tweet markets, or what are the boundaries with regulators in market creation?
Yeah, I can't speak. I can't speak for the regulators, but I can say this: the no action relief is posted at the CFTC website. It is it's quite specific in certain areas and more general in others. We've managed to. There are about 100 and something markets up right now, 180, I think, as of right now. And that's a broad range, but generally speaking, and I'm speaking generally now, they have to be political in nature, election oriented. They have to, and then to be good markets, they've got to be binary outcome, transparently adjudicated, and liquid. I mean, people can focus on, you can do this and you can't do that. But if the market doesn't attract interest.
Well, let me ask. So there's probably some predictable questions that traders have. And again, we respect your deference to what you can and can't say. But one of the heaviest traders, I think we all know him. I love him. Some of you maybe hate him, but I recognize him as my father figure. Domer asks, is there any chance of the $850 cap lifting? For maximum trade positions of $850?
I don't know. That's an honest answer. I don't know what the $850 cap. I can talk philosophically about this for just a minute. The $850 cap serves a purpose. It prevents a wealthy individual from coming in and trying to skew the market. Right. The part of the issue here is, what's the possibility that one of Vladimir Putin's buddies, wealthy oligarchs, going to come in and skew them. With the $850 limit, you can't really do that. And so there is some purpose. I can't predict what's going to happen in the future with respect to the 850 limit.
Maybe we should get a prediction market on the CFTC. No, I won't say
that. Might be liquid. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. We had an interesting suggestion from one of our traders. I like these questions just because it just tells you how much time like grown men with competitive professional jobs spend thinking about your platform. But friend of the podcast, Danger Snake, asks you if you would ever consider a charitable option of donating dead shares to the website, as in those 1% shares that you can't sell because you already lost all the money. We already know who's going to win. It's just a matter of the settlement source publishing. If he could just get a click to donate button on PredictIt to get those losses off his portfolio and maybe, support a charitable cause in case the unthinkable were to happen.
I'll make a note of that. I mean, it's not actually a half bad idea. Well, but you know what? This is where part of the reason I'm on the show today is to get this kind of feedback. I get a lot of emails and we get comments all the time on the message boards. It's not a bad idea.
I know it's probably expensive, but
I don't know. Good thing. Good idea.
So we had another trader. You said you're sort of here. You're doing like the presidential thing of sort of standing in the pocket, getting the glory for scoring the touchdowns, but also taking one or two that you might feel the next day. But one of our other high volume traders, Outside Context Problem, asked, is the site going to be reliable on the next big election? Are things different? I know that you guys want to be the leader. You are the leader in what you do. Traders have had reliability issues on very high volume markets. Is there a flag to wave here to signal great expectations for future events like this big election next week? So my personal and our number one priority is making sure the system is fairly managed, but also reliable from a trader perspective. There are times I say that, and in the context, we've been doing this for 7 years, and we have had times when we are so slammed on the website that it's difficult to keep up, and for the systems to keep up. Sometimes what happens is there's an outage that affects one part of the system, for instance, the identity verification or some other aspect of the system. Other times, there's just so many people charging into the site, trying to, and there. Let me back up. When there is a problem that we have technically with the site, we go to great lengths to
understand why that happened, and then to make sure that that problem never happens again. It doesn't mean that all problems don't happen, or that we are have addressed everything. But we do think this election day coming up, which is not going to be a heavy day relative to some of the other peak periods of Super Tuesdays and the like, we think we are prepared for what we more than the traffic that we expect. I wanted to point out, sometimes there's so many people trying to dump their shares, maybe you guys included, and there are no buyers. I don't have your money. Somebody else has your money. That's part of the issue here. And they don't want to sell, or they don't want to buy back these positions that everybody wants to dump at the same time. No systems that we can possibly put in place, I don't care how big they are and how powerful they are going to be able to help unload a losing position at a profit. But that's not to say, again, back to the original, we have been spending a lot of time and a lot of money. We think we're on top of this.
It's certainly a problem that's driven by success, right? You know, if people didn't want to use your product, you wouldn't have the problem of occasionally not having enough cheeseburgers to hand out to all the people who want those predicted cheeseburgers. So we do appreciate your continued work.
We can do better, and we're attempting to do better. We really are. Go ahead.
Well, look, I think the server issue maybe speaks to a larger question. Obviously, PredictIt was the market leader, the pioneer that broke into the space. Now there's more competition coming in, which from a trader perspective is a great thing. But can you talk maybe a little bit about how, if at all, PredictIt plans to grow, maintain its lead in the industry, and how is competition generally affecting your thinking as a brand and a company?
There are we see two types of immediate direct competition. And in this case, competition almost always is good, even though sometimes it makes life difficult for whoever the market leader is. The competition from regulated markets is one type of competition, right? And that has to do with where the line is drawn in terms of what types of markets can go on PredictIt and what types of markets cannot, and simultaneously what kind of markets can go on a DCM and which markets cannot. So a regulated DCM doesn't have these limits we've been talking about unless they're self-imposed. But a regulated DCM also is not allowed to put up certain types of political markets as an example, by law. So the fact is, PredictIt and the DCMs aren't directly competing, except perhaps on where that line is, on where the gray area is. And there's a gray area, but there's a gray area in a lot of things in life. And we're all grown-ups here, and we understand that it may not be explicitly clear whether a certain type of market falls under a political definition or a non-political definition. And that line may move, as people become more comfortable with political or more comfortable with markets like climate markets and some of the others that there's a lot of demand for some of these types of markets. Then I was on the phone today with a number of the professors who are benefit from the academic research that they do utilizing anonymized PredictIt data. There's about 120 universities or professors at universities or researchers that are using the PredictIt data. West Point's an example, Oxford's another. And these researchers are studying specific things like, why are prediction markets so accurate? What about when they're not accurate? Why are they not accurate? What makes for a super predictor, a super forecaster? What an interesting question, right? What are the characteristics of someone who is a super forecaster? And why does that translate into more accurate forecasts? So anyway, I was on the phone with them. They were looking for additional types of markets, specifically scientific outcomes. So we're not talking about who's going to win the Nobel Prize in physics. It could be one, but rather when will a battery able to do X, Y, and Z be available? Right. When will quantum computing reach a certain number of qubits? This kind of thing is really interesting if you think about it. It could also be, when will there be a vaccine for cancer? So these types of scientific endeavors, which also have profound impact, not just on people's pocketbook, but on their lives. These kinds of forecasting markets can be very usefully explored with a product like PredictIt, and I'm very excited about that.
Why don't you guys? This is just you make me think of all the exciting things going on, and I mean, you could almost do like a genius grant or a genius if you picked like the top 5 traders, which we probably don't even know. I bet the top 5 traders are people that we've never even heard of, and just brought attention to the way that they use the insights on your exchange. I mean, I feel like there's just one part that's missing from why this isn't a really big deal. I think I said earlier that I thought it was a culture thing, but maybe it's just a human thing. I mean, who are these people that are so far ahead of even presidents in realizing the trends in American politics? I mean, let's get some brand ambassadors. How's that? Can I?
Well, that's a great idea. No, we're actually looking at brand ambassadors, but there's a tendency, I think, and we sometimes make this mistake over here, to think that somebody who's a great forecaster on the Iowa caucuses is also a great forecaster on the Fed share. That's not necessarily the case, right? It could be a grandma in her basement in Iowa who's a great forecaster on the Fed share or other federal appointments, and somebody else altogether who is great at forecasting the outcome of the Iowa caucus. It may not be Republicans who can forecast the Iowa Republican caucus better than Democrats or unaffiliated, or people aren't even registered to vote at all. So I think there's one thing that does, certain characteristics. You got to have a good bullshit detector to be a good forecaster, right? I mean, if you consume, and we should talk about this because the ability of PredictIt to serve as an antidote for fake news. You hear people around here talking about that.
Yes.
If you make your forecast based on fake news, you're going to lose your money. It's as simple as that. So if you have the ability to screen out a lot of the noise, that may be, I don't know, but I think that may be 50% of what it takes to be able to forecast. And maybe another thing, if you just know where your sweet spot is not, X is no, if you decide you're no good at forecasting, elections in Virginia, just don't forecast elections in Virginia.
We've certainly seen that stratification on our own contributors here. Sorry, Pratik, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, John, this might be a conversation we can continue, but insofar as there are researchers who are really looking at your data and finding interesting, unique things, I think I and our platform would be very interested in just broadcasting some of those findings, and I suspect our traders would find a lot of value just in improving their own game. But I also think to our earlier conversation, how do we mainstream and remove some of the stigmas and confusion around political gambling? I think you're exactly right that showing that there's real social value beyond a bunch of guys bantering on a forum and gambling money, I think is probably one ingredient to that. And anyway, it's a thought.
There's so much, you're so right about that. And this, I referred to this conversations I had this morning, but in previous conversations with some of these academics and researchers, the idea that about how the brain is wired to process bias and discern accuracy or look at signals. I mean, these are not just economists or political scientists that are consuming the anonymized data. Some of these, these are neurobiologists in some cases. And so, yes, I think I'm unqualified to discuss, to speak at a detailed level about the research that's being done. And frankly, I don't know all the research, but it's a great idea to bring this to light and maybe we've thought about doing conference or get together. The events we used to do, I think you came to a couple of them. The events we did before COVID on election night events or debate night events where we would go to the local political bar in town and rent the place out, do a takeover, and then invite all the PredictIt traders from the, surrounding zip codes. It's awesome. I mean, these guys turn the bar into a trading floor, and it's fascinating. And I mean,
we really feel like our role, like I'll be conspiratorial and say that to some extent there probably is like just a cabal of, white-haired people in Washington who sort of decide what the story is. And like oftentimes that's not what the story is. That's not what's actually happening in policymaking. So we feel it's our job to figure out how to tell the story that, your markets tell, which is oftentimes the real story. It's not the fake story. So, any way that we can help build the community, any way that we can help disseminate that information, that is, that's what we do here.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that. And that's why I'm on. I mean, I'd love to be invited to come back on that. One of the things that to your point about people pontificating about, what's likely to happen in Virginia's upcoming election or else. Yeah. When you say, I think there's a 40% odds that such and such is going to happen, and without it being based on actual data, what does that mean? Exactly.
It's the equivalent of saying that the election will come down to turnout.
Right. Special teams and extra points. That's what's going to decide the game. Come on.
Yeah. So what's great about PredictIt is you actually get odds. Okay. You get odds. The actual, what the market is saying, what people are saying with their money. And that is something to talk about.
Well, one question I had on that point is, I guess one of the maybe questions or concerns I've had about PredictIt is that often some of the most interesting markets are actually not those 50-50, 60-40 markets, but they're in the range of the 90-10 or 95-5. And in many ways, the most interesting questions are when the 1 or 2% probability actually comes to the fold. I wonder, though, that with the way PredictIt's fee structure is, with the way that fees happen on trades, and then also on the heavy fee that comes from withdrawals. In addition, obviously, just not being convenient for traders, I've always wondered if that might distort some of the value that's being generated from the markets. Have you guys thought about, as you've grown, maybe figuring out a way to adjust revenues and fees in a way that can retain the purity of the market signal?
Yeah, you make a very good point. And it does, the fee structure does distort the long shot. We'll call them long shots. Yeah, the way it's structured does distort that. The 5% withdrawal fee discourages people from withdrawing their money from the system, so they'll stay in, they'll create more liquidity, et cetera. It's a trade-off, right? The question you asked is, do we look at alternatives to that? And the answer is yes, all the time. And there are some of these markets that are going to be regulated markets, or they have a different fee structure, tapers off at the end. So we do look at it. I have yet to be persuaded that the alternatives are a lot better. Margin linking be an example. With some of these other fee structures, you can't do what you want to do with respect to the incentivizing behavior. Remember the fee on the profit, it's on the profit that you take on a trade. If you lose money on a trade, there's no fee on that profit. There's still a withdrawal fee. If you have money to withdraw at the end, you don't have to. But it's not perfect. I'll grant you that. It does seem to work up to a point. And we are, in answer to your question, we do look at alternative fee structures. We are looking at them. And there are alternatives. It's just that each one seems to have a drawback. I wanted to mention also your point about the long shot. We published some research. I should share this with you guys, maybe in a subsequent show, about the 10 most common biases that political traders have. So long shot bias is one of them, right? And I can't trade on PredictIt, but I'm one. I just love the long shots. When somebody tells me 10-1 against such and such happening, I'm with the underdog, and I'll overestimate in my own mind what the possibility is of making a killing, and that will offset the unlikely nature of that killing ever occurring. So there are biases. Confirmation bias. You bought some and then you want to buy some more just because you bought some before, even though the price went down. So we should talk about these different biases that political traders have, because it's really interesting. You'll spot yourself, perhaps, as I do myself, in some of these biases in terms of proclivities with respect to PredictIt.
Yeah, you definitely sound like the bad angel and like the red dress sitting on my shoulder when you talk about those habits of yours.
I don't know about the dress part, but that's okay.
Sean, yeah, maybe not. All right, John, we've got one more question for you. If these are going to be traditions, maybe this will become part of our tradition and when we check in with you over at Predicted HQ. We're lovers of democracy. We're lovers of America. We like to cover all of the strangest traditions that our elected leaders do. One of those traditions is executive clemency. The president can pardon, some people who have some weird situations that, maybe they got done dirty. So I would like to officially request executive clemency for a trader by the name of Imagine, who has been banned from your discussion boards. He's a great trader. He provides a lot of good information to people. I think that he just got into like a really nasty fight with an anonymous stranger on the discussion boards. I don't really know the full story. I just know he's a trader who's provided a lot of information that's helped other people make money and succeed. So I, Keen Dog, president of Spangled Gamblers, informally, I'll have my lawyer Pratik here drafted up in proper paper language. I am requesting clemency for Trader Imagine. We respect your discretion as the CEO and the grand poobah of political gambling, but I just wanted to make my voice heard on behalf of my boy Imagine here. So take that as you will.
Thank you. We'll take it. I'm not familiar with the details of this, but we'll take it under advisement and make a determination. Certainly, I appreciate you bringing it to my attention. Also, I wanted to mention to you guys that we have, as you know, we have a promo code set up. So for new traders, this is for new people coming in who aren't currently predicted traders. If you use this promo code when you open an account, we will match up to $50 of your first deposit. The promo code is www.predictit.com/promo/SSG50. All right. So if you use that promo code when you open up your account, then we'll credit up to $50 of your first deposit. All right. Great.
John Phillips, thank you for joining us. We hope to see you again sometime soon. Very excited to be in on the action this Tuesday in Virginia. I'm Keen Dog on behalf of Spangled Gamblers. This has been special. Thanks, John.
Thank you. It's been great.